Hey, what's up? Welcome to my podcast, Why Aren't You More Famous? Today, I'm joined by Henry Sir. Very excited to talk to Henry. Just finished watching his special yesterday. He has a new special out on YouTube called Mr. Sir. And any other Don't Tell set that came out the same day?
It came out the day after.
Day after.
Yeah, a little strategic on my part.
Yeah.
Not that it did anything, but I was thinking that could be a good way to get a little traffic over there, you know?
Which one has more views?
Oh, the Don't Tell one, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Do you think how's the reception been?
I mean, it's tough to say because on one hand, good. Like I was really hesitant to post my special because initially I was like, I'm just going to record an album. But then with doing that, it's like, well, you might as well film it and clip it up because that's what being a comedian is. But then I was like, enough people were like, nah, man, just come out with the shoot you did. And I was like, I'm just afraid it's going to 10 people are going to see it. And yeah, so I mean, it's more views than I was expecting. Hopefully it can keep getting views. But, you know, from the feedback I've gotten, people seem to enjoy it. And that's kind of in theory, at least, the whole point is hopefully you make something you're reasonably proud of and people enjoy it.
Well, how do you feel about it? Do you feel proud of it?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I have a tough time doing anything and not putting a negative spin on it.
Yeah, don't we all?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Watching yourself do anything, especially something you're actually passionate about, is torture. But I liked the jokes. I feel like it was a good hour. I thought it went well. And yeah, I'm glad I just got out of my own way and did it. So I think so. As happy with it as a curmudgeonly Eeyore like me can be, I think I am.
Yeah, and so this is your first special. How long have you been doing stand-up?
So I've been doing it. I've been doing stand-up. I mean, I started 15 years ago, but I was doing it just like I was playing basketball in college and stuff. So when my name came up on like the local club's amateur night, I'd do it, and then I really started doing it like 12 years ago. So I had one other album come out that I did, but I don't know. I just kind of got to a point. I was like, man, I'm tired of just like hoarding jokes and doing the same shit over and over again. So yeah, whatever. Go do the stuff you have, do the hour you have, put it out there, move on. You know.
So how old are you?
I am 36.
30. Oh, so your wife she's like, you guys met in high school?
We met in college.
In college. Okay, yeah. Because I remember in the special you said you've been with your wife for 17 years, and I was like, how old is Henry?
Yeah,
I was like,
I'm 58.
Yeah. It's like I did not think he was that old. So you grew up in Edmonton.
Edmonton, Alberta, baby.
And then you played college basketball there?
Yeah, in Canada. Yeah. So not American college basketball.
Well, Canada basketball now has gotten to a pretty high level.
Yeah. A lot better than it and it was still good, but it's really gone in the right direction the last decade and a bit. So it was not playing for Michigan or something like that,
right.
But for me it was a fun level, and yeah, got to play basketball for a long time, so that was cool.
That's actually how we met. Playing basketball. You're
Totally.
one of a few guests that I've had on the podcast that are people that I know more through basketball even than comedy.
Yeah,
which is
totally.
Funny. So have you ever met Steve Nash?
I have. Yeah, I have met Steve Nash. He was a really cool dude.
What was that like? How'd you meet him?
It was at this when I finished playing. I was working for Alberta Basketball Association. It's like the provincial not-for-profit basketball organization, and we had an event, and Nash came to Edmonton for it. And yeah, just the coolest, down-to-earth Canadian dude.
That's awesome.
It was very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I just want to know, like, because you're somebody where, like, you know, we've, you know, played basketball together. We know each other a little bit, but not super well. So I get, like, what was so you grew up in Alberta, and then you played basketball. What were you into as a kid? Outside of basketball.
Yeah, it was I feel like I kind of just got a little bit indoctrinated into basketball being the focal point of everything. My dad was a college player. He played pro. My oldest brother had a very long professional career. My other brothers played basketball too. So basketball, in ways it was good, in other ways it was bad, kind of felt like everything. Otherwise, though, I don't know, man. Just pretty general stuff. Like I really like just doing whatever dumb shit with buddies. But I was really into filmmaking with my one brother Sam from a pretty early age. We were really into making just dumb, like kind of 80s action style movies, and got really into music as well. Started playing music with buddies when I was in junior high. So I don't know, man. Pretty just pretty like sports, music, hanging out with buddies, goofing around. But I did always have not necessarily stand up, but I always was very into comedy. I always thought trying to come up with funny ideas was kind of my main interest as long as I can remember.
What were like your earliest influences in comedy, or like earliest exposures to it?
Jim Carrey was huge. I'm an incredibly lethargic person, so he's not necessarily like a personal influence on me. But that guy, I didn't even know, it had nothing to do with him even being Canadian, but you couldn't look anywhere without seeing Jim Carrey. And he really showed me, like, at a young age, the kind of power of being able to make people laugh. Otherwise, I would say it's going to sound kind of weird, but Leslie Nielsen from Naked Gun.
Is he Canadian?
Oh yeah,
Oh.
He's a Canadian boy, or he was. The Naked Gun movies, I loved those when I was a little kid. Seinfeld was huge for me. My parents watched Seinfeld, so I got into Seinfeld at a young age. But that kind of stuff were really, really huge for me comedy wise.
And then let me take these off. What was it? Sorry. Yeah. So what's Alberta like? Because in the special you talk about it a little bit, and I think that I don't really know much about Canada outside of like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, and so it was kind of interesting to hear you talk about Alberta, which seems more similar to like a more, at least from the impression I got from it, like in the U.S. what would be like a more like rural Midwestern town.
Sure.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, probably accurate. Alberta gets called the Texas of Canada all the time because it's like oil, cowboy kind of stuff, cattle, beef. They talk about it, especially just this obsession with beef and steak. Alberta is interesting. It's definitely the most conservative part of Canada. It's kind of like the most American part of Canada in a lot of ways. It's just its own, culturally it's its own thing, and there's a lot of ways it's good, and there's other ways it's different for everyone. I don't think it is. So I like to poke fun at it, and I wanted to make sure to not run away from being Canadian. I kind of feel as Canadians, it's a bummer, but we kind of have this sense of, well, we got to get to the States if we're going to make anything of this. And when we do, it's like, well, we're based in America, so we have to be American comics. But I don't know. I was kind of just like, nah, man, that's a huge part of who I am and the way I view the world and stuff. So I wanted to joke about it and not shy away from it. And I'm glad an American guy who isn't too familiar with it can be like, wait, what the hell is this dude talking about with Alberta? But yeah, it's pretty like cowboy, kind of like Wild West. Yeah, the oil field is huge there, so it's people come up to make a ton of money in the oil patch and then go blow it on cocaine and strippers that weekend.
So it really is like Texas.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it sounds like Houston.
Yeah, exactly. The Canadian version, because people will say that, like, man, it's like the South. And I haven't actually been to Texas, but when I've gone to I've done like clubs in Tennessee or whatever, and I'm like, okay, it's by Canadian standards, sure. It's still pretty moderate, though. It's pretty moderate.
Yeah, it's very much the Canadian version of that.
Exactly.
So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting thing about the special was how Canadian it was and how much you talked about that. And like from an outside perspective, like I really liked that because I'm like, I'm learning things.
Yeah.
Like I'm learning what the Alberta stereotypes are. Yeah. And so how long? So I know you moved here from LA, right? And you lived in Minnesota for a little bit.
When I was a kid, yeah.
So what was like? Walk me through every place you lived.
Sure, yeah. So born and raised Edmonton, and then when I was 12, we moved to the Twin Cities. My dad's from Iowa, and he has a lot of family that's mainly in the Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Twin Cities area. So that's kind of always the plan. And we went there. And for a lot of reasons, it just didn't go well for our family. But it was strange, man. Like people will say Minnesota's like Canada, and I think in a lot of ways it is. There's still pretty vast differences, though. Like, it's really tough to put your finger on. It's a strange thing because as Americans and Canadians, I think we're about as close to each other as you can be.
Right.
But still huge, huge differences. And I think as a Commonwealth country in Canada, we have more of like a British influence to us. And I'm not trying to be like we're better or anything like that, but we're a lot more reserved. So when we moved to Minnesota, I couldn't believe how hyper everyone was and how loud all the kids were. Like, there was a kid I grew up with. I'll say his name. I don't even care. His name's Chris. He's still a dear friend of mine. But he was like the annoying hyper kid that parents were kind of like, oh, God, Chris is coming over. Like, this might be a little much. But he was like one of one. And Chris would have just been a calm dude at the school I went to. Mm-hmm. Like, Americans are just dialed up. And I think at that age, we were just being younger. They were especially like, what is going on up there?
Oh, I think that... Are they trying to find the entrance?
Trying to record. Get in here and record with us, guys.
This has happened before, for the listener or even for the viewer, if you're watching the video, the studio has the window just faces out to the street. So I have no idea if people were trying to like get in. I don't know what was going on.
Let us podcast, man.
Come on.
Come on, get in here. Let's make a new pod.
Let us do. Yeah, that'd be so funny.
This is a new pod. But yeah, that was Minnesota, and then we moved back, and then I got into comedy, and I'm lucky that I'm a dual citizen because my dad's from Iowa, so I just had the pretty easy option to move to the States. And maybe this is catching me at a bad time. I don't mean to sound like anti-American, but with what's going on right now,
it's not a great time.
It's not a great time.
It was something I was gonna say. I was like, you kind of came to America. Maybe at the tail end of America. Yeah,
kind of the swan song of America, right? When we're finding out like, oh, it's America and Russia. Interesting. Yeah. But all this stuff that Trump's doing he keeps talking about Canada being the 51st state and our prime minister being a governor. Like, it actually really pisses me off. So I don't want to sound like un-American or anything like that. But moved here because there's more opportunity for comedy and whatnot, and I'm very grateful to have. It's a really cool experience to have lived in New York and LA, but also have a few negative things to say, if I'm being honest.
Hey, let's go.
You want to get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it, man.
I mean, a lot of good things to say too, so I don't want it to just be focused on that. LA was cool. I mean, living in Southern California, especially when you're coming from the prairies of Alberta, I mean, literally at least once a year, Edmonton's the coldest city in the world. So the opposite kind of climate of the Mediterranean SoCal. That was awesome. Living near the beach, fucking ruled. Met some really cool people. Also met some of the slimiest people you'll ever meet in your life. I find that with kind of stand-up in general. Yeah. Some of the most self-serving, narcissistic, just garbage pail human beings you'll ever meet in your life. And in New York and LA, it's crawling with them. So I kind of got bogged down by a lot of the cliches people talk about LA. Just everybody's looking over your shoulder all the time. People are doing all the bullshit, disingenuous, love you, bro, great to see you, bro, acting like you're friends. And it's like, dude, I can't help you. And I know the only reason you're talking to me like this is because then you're going to ask me, like, how'd you get booked on that?
Right.
And then living here in New York is very cool, especially from the stand-up viewpoint. I like the stand-up a lot better. I think you can do a lot more of it. The quality and the quantity is better. But you also run into a lot of just crazy, narcissistic, self-absorbed, self-obsessed people. And that it's just draining, honestly. I find it very, very draining. They're everywhere. People like that exist in Edmonton too, but not that many. In cities like LA and New York, it wears on you, the amount of self-serving narcissism that's kind of inescapable.
Yeah. Do you feel like being like that you're married to somebody that you've known throughout this entire time? Like that helps you keep you grounded?
Totally.
And
yeah.
Do you have a kid? Am I making that up?
Nope, no kid.
Do you have a dog?
Do have a dog.
I met your dog. That's what
it
was.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
At the Big Wolkowski. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No kid. I do think having someone like that is, for me, it's great. Like, she's been around since before I even started stand up, and yeah, I think I just have a different perspective on it, and I'm more. And I think from just a stand up viewpoint, it can almost be detrimental because I'm kind of like, I just want to go home most of the time. I don't really want to stick around and just get bombed and riff and talk shit till 3 a.m. I'm like, I haven't really seen my wife today, and I like to go pet my dog too. So but for me, it's good. I do think it helps keep me grounded, and also it helps for what I want to do comedy for. Like the only thing I'm interested in is doing comedy, is telling jokes, is getting ideas out there. Like that's literally all I give a shit about. The other stuff is nothing to me. It's literally nothing. It doesn't matter. Of course it has to from the career standpoint of wanting to level up and, you know, fucking finally figured out how to like sell tickets and get to that next level. But I also think it's all just noise and it's all just fluff at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, I remember when I met you, I was like, this guy is, you know, to me, you're living the dream. You perform at the Cellar. You got a wife. You got a dog. You're good at basketball. Like that's everything I want.
Yeah, it's nice. It's good.
You're 6'5". That might be unattainable for me.
Don't stop dreaming, dude. Get there.
But yeah. So how did you end up getting past at the Cellar? Like, because that seemed like right when you moved here. Not to ask that in a way of like being one of those guys that's like, how'd you get this thing?
No, totally. I know as comics we're such how'd you get that, bro? Just start networking on the pod. I know that that's such a big space for us as comics. Just kind of the conventional, like I got vouched for there, and then I was actually living in LA and I was going to do 2 weeks in Ottawa and Toronto. And then I was thinking, well, I hadn't been to New York in a few years because I used to come here all the time pre-COVID. And I was like, well, okay, I'll before going to Toronto or Ottawa, whichever one it was, I'll go do that showcase, and was horrified. And I did, though, and got passed, which I couldn't believe. And then after, instead of going right back to LA, I went up to Ottawa, Toronto, came back here to do another week and do some spots. And then I just tried coming here as much as possible. And then, I don't know, just kind of felt like we knew living in the States probably wasn't going to be permanent. Like if we have a family or something, we're going to want to do that in Canada. And as cool as LA was in some ways, the whole reason we moved and my wife was cool enough with moving was I have this stand-up addiction. And I was like, well, if we're going to be moving and do stand-up, let's actually do stand-up and not do 3 spots a week and be like, what an incredible week that was in LA. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's kind of how it went. Just the general getting vouched for, auditioning, and then basing your life around it, which is a horrifically unhealthy thing to do.
How often are you performing at the Cellar?
I mean, it started out great. It gets icy sometimes, man, when you're not like a made man. So
that is what I've heard.
Yeah, it's tough to. It can be a bit of a trap where if you're getting too much of like your self-worth is rooted in how many spots did I get this week, and it's a great place. It really is awesome, and it pushes you as a comic, I think, because you might go in there like, you know what, let me try out these new jokes, and then it's just like killer. And whenever I do a spot, I always go up last. So I'm like, okay, well, it was just 5 murderers killing for their entire set. I have to do well. So it's cool in that sense. It really pushes you to become and forces you to become a better comic. So it is as good as advertised. But I think you ask a lot of comics there, especially ones that haven't been there a lot and don't feel like always secure there. It can drive we can let it drive ourselves absolutely nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. And what does your wife do?
She does photography. She was doing office admin stuff in Canada, but then she wasn't able to get her visa for a while. But it's been cool. We've been able to. She's done an awesome job of she's been doing photography for a while, but now she actually does like book gigs with it and does it professionally. So it's been really cool to see her blossom like that in New York.
That's really cool. That's a cool artist couple.
Yeah, I think photography is wicked. I don't have an eye for it, but I think it's like it's cool. You can see someone and be like, that would make a good picture. Then you take a picture like that looks terrible. And to actually like, I know a lot of it's like just technical knowledge and whatnot with lenses, editing, everything like that. But I think it's a really, really cool way of viewing the world. And yeah, I think photographers are pretty cool.
Yeah, photography is interesting because it is almost like stand-up comedy in the way where there's so little like barrier to entry. Where because like with photography, it's like now, you know, it used to be like you had to buy a camera and like maybe you would take pictures and you know you had film, so you wouldn't want to waste all your film, so you'd be like sparing with what you were taking a picture of. And now I have no idea. I'm like hypothesizing about the past, but now like we all have iPhones or whatever, and so like we all have these incredible cameras in our pockets with unlimited photos.
Very much so.
And it's kind of similar to how, you know, we can all take pictures. Anybody can sign up at an open mic.
Totally.
And do stand up. Anybody.
Totally.
And so I think it is similar in that sense of like, you know, I also feel like a little jealous of people that have that eye for photography where I'm like, I can recognize when something is a cool picture, but I can't take them. You know what I mean? And it's like, it seems so simple, but there's like there is a skill to it.
Absolutely. I think there is a natural ability and an eye for it, but I also think similar to stand up, it does just take practice too, because my wife would say like some of the photos she looks back on that she used to think like, wow, this is my magnum opus. She'd be like, okay, that was clearly just a younger, less skilled version of herself doing it. Same with us with comedy. We all have those jokes and those bits or those times where like, I've really found my voice. And then 2 years later, you look back and like, God, that bit sucked. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have many of those. So what were you? So you guys met in college. What were you? What were you studying?
Nothing. I was playing basketball and wasting time. I was really not a particularly good student ever in school. And I went to school to play basketball, and it got to a point where I was like, all right, you do have to pick a major at some point. And I went to a pretty small college, so the options were limited, but I ended up just doing an English and sociology degree. Because I was thinking after, I was like, maybe I'll be like an English teacher or something like that. I was going to go get my education degree. But yeah, I got my English degree like not knowing how to write. Like I think I'd like learned how to use a comma when I was like 30. So it was just embarrassing how awful I was at that. But I squeaked by, baby. Got that English degree.
So college athletes, so it's similar. It's similar to the States then in that regard.
Oh yeah, except with less like potential to really go somewhere after. And,
did you think you would play professionally at any point?
I thought that there was a chance I could play in a low level in Europe. That realistically too, I know if because of my oldest brother, like I mentioned, that played pro for so long. He was encouraging to me. He was saying like, I think you could play in like a second or third division somewhere. Like you're not really going to make money, but you could go live somewhere and you like, you know, they'll pay for you to live there, and you know, you might make a little bit, but it's not going to be a career. I thought there was some opportunities for that, but also I was nuts. I was really struggling with depression by the time I finished, so I was not mentally equipped to like. For example, one of them was like to go live in remote northern Finland.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I can just go sit in the dark by myself for 7 months where where I can't communicate with anyone, you know?
Yeah, that sounds brutal. I've the like, cause it's similar. I feel like because we watch like the NBA and other professional leagues where they're making millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so you think of like, oh, professional athlete, like what a glorious life. But then there are people that are they're doing that, but at the level that maybe we're doing comedy at, where it's like they might be making some money and they're getting to do the thing they love, but it's like they don't get to do it in New York City. You know, they have to do it in like not even like England or France, like Finland. You know,
no, totally. And there's I know a lot of guys who have played and gals who have played overseas, and there's the same player will have some years where they're like, yeah, I was playing in whatever this country. And it was awesome. The city ruled. There's tons to do. You made a nice living, nothing crazy, but made like a good chunk of change. Or maybe it was like I made a normal living. Like someone's like, I made like $65,000 or something, but I'd rather be doing that for work than doing some whatever thing. But then it could also be like, I know a dude who played in Portugal, and people are like, holy shit, Portugal, that's incredible. He's like, dude, I lived in like the backwoods mountains where again, no one spoke English. Understandably, of course, because like it was just the loneliest, most isolated experience of his life. And so, yeah, I mean, I respect it though, because similar to comedy, we find ourselves sometimes we're like, what the hell am I doing? Well, this is a nightmare, you know, and they love it, and it's their passion, and they follow it, and sometimes it's cool, and other times it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and I mean also, you know, playing basketball professionally, I imagine, is such an insane, like even if you're just playing at a lower level, like it's still an insane amount of work, and you have to take such insane care of your body. Where like with comedy, we can be like, yeah, I did a 15-minute set tonight. I'm working hard.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
yeah, no.
I'm working. I did 10 minutes, and then I ate 2 cheeseburgers. After.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
exactly. I did 2 sets, and then I went and just got blitzed with some guys, and like busting my ass. Yeah, totally.
I work so hard. Why do I not have a Netflix special?
Yeah, exactly. I should be doing the Matt Rife crowd work special.
So who are there any guys that you came up with in Canada, comedy wise, that are here now?
A little bit actually, because there's so many. This city's crawling with us Canucks
Yeah.
now, and being from Edmonton, most of the comics are from Toronto or Vancouver. So I've gotten to know more of the Canadian comics from out east. But I was kind of the lone Alberta dude. But now there's a number of them that they're not from Edmonton, but we all lived in Edmonton at the same time for a little bit. So this dude Bobby Warner, he lives out here now. He's very funny. Malik Alsal, he's from Calgary.
I didn't know he was Canadian.
Yeah, dude, he's from Calgary. He lived in Edmonton at the same time. He and Bobby are thick as thieves, and we're buddies. And Marito Lopez, he's from Calgary, but he lives out here now. But other buddies, like my buddy Jarrett Campbell, we've become really good friends. He's from the Toronto area, and yeah, I'm very grateful that there's a big chunk of Canadian comics.
Do you guys feel like you can always you always know when you see each other? Like you always can tell like that guy's Canadian.
A little bit. I mean, I think it's because there's so few of us. Like there's 1/10 of the population in Canada as there is here. So more often than not, whether you've met them or not, you've heard of them or you're aware of them just because it's a pretty small world up in Canada. But I will say, like anything else, there's also ones that are just like, oh, this guy sucks. This guy's a lunatic. But more often than not, there's a pretty Canadian sensibility, and you can kind of, I don't know. It's just like I said, it is small differences, but there's enough of them, and culturally we are different. So I think there's a comfortability I certainly feel with Canadian comics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to the depression. If you don't mind talking about that.
That's why I get out of bed. That's why I struggle to get out of bed for in the morning.
That was good. Yeah, because I remember in the special you talk about you've been like on antidepressants since you were 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that start?
Sure. I'm actually I'm glad that I'm getting to a point comedy wise, because like you finish your recording and you're kind of like, what the hell do I do? But I've actually been psyched because all the jokes I'm interested in talking about are a little like, they're still jokes, but I think they're more along like this line of that kind of stuff, like mental health, spirituality, shit like that. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I was always a pretty in my head kid, but I was a pretty like happy, well-adjusted kid too. I was always a little neurotic, pretty obsessive, and I could get moody, but you know, you're a kid, whatever. And then when we moved to Minnesota, I think it was just at a very important time for me developmentally, and I just did not handle it well enough. It's like a switch went off in my brain, and I just got leveled with depression. And 12's pretty young for that.
Yeah.
I literally had to get pulled out of school. Like I couldn't I could not function. And yeah, I had to go, I say in the special, but I had to go on the highest dosage of antidepressants like an adult can go on.
So what is that?
At the time I think it was 80 milligrams.
80 milligrams of what?
Prozac.
Of Prozac. Wow.
Yeah, and as a little kid, like, well, not little, but you know what I mean. Yeah, you're a little kid. You're 12.
12 is very young.
You're a fucking little kid when you're 12, and it was hard, dude. Like it was very much like kind of a personality shift, honestly, and it's been a really, really big part of my life ever since then. I'm open to talk about it. I think it's important stuff to talk about. I used to be like ashamed of it or embarrassed or feel like an inconvenience or a burden if I bring it up. But no, man, it's very real stuff. And it's a lot of it in my family. My one brother who passed away struggled with mental health very, very seriously. So I'm an open book with that stuff. But yeah, man, 12 years old and just something happened in my brain. And it's been an uphill battle. I'm not gonna lie, and it's always gonna be. It's just a part of my life. And people that struggle with addiction and like depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, they know what I mean. Like it's just a part of who you are, and you gotta learn how to manage it.
Yeah, and yeah, I wanted to talk about that. You know, because obviously one of the things we first connected on was that we both have brothers that died. How did so your brother older, younger? Older, and how old was he? How old were you?
I was 34 and he was 38.
Okay, yeah, so pretty recently.
Yeah, it's coming up on 2 years in April.
Yeah.
It was brutal, dude. I've said this before, and this like the worst part is that he passed. Of course.
Yeah.
But the timing of it was all so fucked up because I've always struggled with like with the mental health stuff of just this lack of belief in myself and just self-doubt that I think anybody has, but I can just speak to myself of how the mental illnesses have really made it worse. And then I finally got to this point of like liberation where I was like, you know what? I'm far from a finished product, but I'm heading in the right direction. I'm happy with the decisions I made. Like I got from a comedy standpoint, and we put too much of our self-worth in it, but I got past the cellar. I got booked for Comedy Central, which was my big like first what felt like a big taping in the US. And then literally within days, Ben died. And then it just fucking cratered. Like these past 2 years have been really, really hard mentally. And I think about the dude all the time, and I miss him really, really dearly. Can I ask how old was your brother, and how old were you when he passed?
So he was 20 and I was 16.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, and when you were talking about, being 12 and having this shift in your like similar thing where, 16, I think at the time when you're 16, you feel pretty grown up.
Yeah.
But then this thing happens, and, and looking back, I'm like, I was a child. And, like, this just fully, like, changed the trajectory of the rest of my childhood and my life. And
absolutely.
How did your brother die?
It was an accidental overdose, fentanyl.
Wow. That was, my brother, it was a brain aneurysm. But I have the rapper Mac Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was friends with, he was close friends with my brother.
Oh shit.
So we became friends after my brother died.
Wow.
But then he died of a accidental fentanyl overdose. So
it's awful, man.
It's such a terrible way to, I mean, not that I was gonna say it's a terrible way to die. I'm like, I don't know if there's a great way to die.
There's a good way when you're suffering, because it came from, like, Ben was really unwell. He really struggled mentally, and just like the buildup that leads to that sort of thing, and anyone that leads to that sort of thing, it's just heartbreaking. But yeah, dude, I'm so sorry that happened to your family and to your brother. That sucks.
Yeah, I mean, you too.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
How has it been? So you have two other brothers.
Yeah.
And both your parents are.
Yeah,
Still alive and they're still together.
Yep. It's been hard, man. Like it puts a damper on life. It's like another thing where it's just you got to cope and like grief's very real. Mm-hmm. And I think most people would believe that, but until you really go through it, I don't think you can fully grasp its magnitude. And well, you can't, and I hope you don't ever have to. And there's levels to it. Like, if your grandparent dies, that sucks. And if your dog dies, you can grieve that too. But it's different when it's a sibling and and there's youth involved in it.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that those two things where like the sibling death, it's kind of, I know, because this is something I've talked about with my mom, that like when my brother died, she read like a lot of books about like parents dealing with grief, and she was trying to find like books about sibling grief, and I think she said she found literally one book.
Yeah. And
it's just like something that's just not talked about, where like everybody knows like parent death, sad, of course, but it is like that's the natural progression.
Exactly, yeah.
And then child death, worst thing that could ever happen to anyone.
Totally.
But sibling death, it's just not talked about.
Yeah, totally. Because immediately you'll go to how are the parents doing, and understandably, because it's hard for everyone, and I'm not a parent, so I can only guess on the feeling, but it's a nightmare, the worst case scenario. But that they say that as siblings, you kind of get like lost in the shuffle of grieving, and you're still. Your life's forever changed, and probably for the worse. It could ultimately end up in like, all right, well, you have a healthier perspective and a clearer perspective, and maybe you can block out the noise and bullshit of life a little bit more. But when it's rooted in such a horrible loss, it's still bad. Like I've had those morons that give you the unsolicited advice of like, everything happens for a reason. One day this will be such a valuable lesson. You just want to, power bomb them through a burning table or something. But
yeah, it's also like, well, maybe, but I'd rather not have the lesson.
I would rather
I'd
not
rather
know.
My brother
exactly.
was alive.
I would way rather not have learned this lesson and be kicking it with my brother.
Yeah,
100%.
And he was a musician as well. So you guys played music together?
Yeah, that's something that one of the things that makes me saddest is we were talking more and more about playing music with each other. And we did this annual thing back in Edmonton. We go back for the holidays, and we'd only done it twice, but his name was Ben. So, and Henry, we called it Henjamin, and we just did this like music comedy night. It was really nice. It was a really cool thing. And something I really respect and admire about Ben is that he was a very, very gifted songwriter. He played like, started in more just like punk, then it became more kind of like, pop punk, rock and roll, but he really had a gift for beautiful vocal melodies and meaning. He squeezed a lot of words into his songs, and there was so much substance in it. But he wasn't trying to make it as a musician either. Like, the dude never was like, I'm trying to become famous or defined by this. It was a huge part of his life, but so was just community, so was veganism, so was helping others. The guy was so helpful to others, cared about other people so much, and even though he had his own goals and aspirations, he constantly put those of others ahead of himself. And again, the more I do this comedy stuff where I'm like, I've met just some of the most hollow, full of shit people that if they think they can help you, they'll be cool to you, right. And if you can't, they'll just look through you. That's probably, outside of him just being my brother, that's the thing I miss about him the most, because our world could use so much more of people that approach life like Ben did.
Yeah, and how has it been like with your other brothers and your parents, like dealing with this loss together, and have you been able to like lean on each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar. It's just everybody handles it differently, and we're all pretty. I mean, even though the fact that I do stand up and I fucking put garbage reels of, I shouldn't call this guy something so negative. I'll put reels where I'm like, God, I don't want to be putting this out, even if I like the joke. I put myself out there a lot, but I have a lot of walls where I don't fully let people in a ton. So that's kind of a lot of people in my family. But yeah, still, despite that, in our own way, can lean on each other. And it's hard though, man. It's hard. It's like, you know how it is with grief. You kind of start thinking like, I figured this out. And not I'm over it, but I figured it out. And then nothing will happen. And I'm like, damn, I kind of feel like I did the day after I found out he passed again. And it's just a shitty part of life going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even especially that first year, which is crazy to think about. That when I met you, it was only I guess a few months after.
Oh, dude, I'm a lunatic.
Yeah,
when I look back on it, it's insane the life decisions I made, and I don't know if I'd change them, because it just is what it is. Like I said, I got past the cellar, and like we topped off right. We were talking about right off the top, like that for us lunatic comics, that feels like a big deal.
Yeah.
And a guy like me, I wish I felt comfortable or confident enough to be like, I'm going to take an indefinite amount of time off and we'll see what happens. If I want to get back into it, I'll get back into it, but I got to take care of myself first. But instead, I pretty much just moved to New York. I went back to Edmonton for like 10 days, then pretty much just moved to New York, which is... you're already kind of mental. You're going through something as awful as losing your brother, and then you go to the city that's notorious for being horrific on your mental health. And
especially also, first year of grief is really hard. First year in New York is very hard.
Oh, I was nuts. I was so sad. I was so fucked up, and that's all perfectly understandable. I don't beat myself up over it, but. Yeah, it's been a challenge, man. It's really continuously shifted what I find important, what I don't find important. A lot of that's been comedy. Like I'm glad I stuck with it, and I'm glad I came out with this special, whatever. But I was very, very seriously considering just being like, I'm done. Fuck all this. Like I just, who gives a shit? This isn't important. And that still dawns on me and weighs on me pretty often. But yeah, man, it's been there's no point in sugarcoating. It has been a really, really difficult.
Oh yeah.
Not quite 2 years.
Yeah, and I mean, I know, for me that time period, I was in high school, and I think I took I definitely had, teachers were much more lenient on me that, in terms of like missing school and being late on assignments and stuff. But I think that there was a benefit to having that structure during that time, and just having, because I think about obviously I'm like, I wish it had happened, not at all, but if it was to happen later, just so I could have had more time with him.
Sure.
But then it's like, as an adult, you have to figure out what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I had sort of this idea of like, well, I'm not gonna like drop out of high school. Like I'm not. I want to still like. I was always. I also like dealt with depression as a younger kid as well. And I was like, I felt like different and was just like wanted to be normal. And so this was the thing that like really made me different. And then I was like, well, I have to I just got to do school. I just got to go. I got to do school. I got to play basketball. Like just go through with what life is.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something about that I think that is a more masculine thing because I'm just basing it on how my parents reacted. Where like, my parents at the time, they owned a furniture store together. And my dad just continued going to work, and my mom never like worked at the store. They don't have the store anymore, but and my mom, she's a writer, and so like now she's working on her first book about my brother dying.
Oh wow.
So which is a funny thing, in terms of like we talk about the like blessings in disguise, or like the people say it's like, well, you got a book out of it. It's like would rather not have the book.
Rather
have a son and never publish anything.
100%, dude. 100%. And yeah, it's there's no. Well, I was gonna say there's no right or wrong way to handle it. I would probably say that's true because I certainly think there's a wrong way. Like
probably some wrong ways.
I've gone through a few. I mean, I've never been a big drinker, but since he passed, I've had, especially in New York, I've had some points and some stretches where I'm like, ooh, I am really drowning myself in the sauce right now to try and numb the pain. And that's never good. Never. It's a fucking terrible thing to do. So there's a wrong way to do it. But yeah, it's different for everyone. Like my mom was retiring and retired and then worked as a teacher and then subbed pretty much every day for the next year. And at first you're like, what are you doing? You're retired. But it's like, well, no, she's keeping herself busy and she's trying to be of service to others. Just like I was talking about Ben, that's a very important thing to him and to us. So yeah, no, there's you got to keep your mind busy, and it's really, really hard.
Yeah, I think there's a certain level of you have to find that balance between feeling your emotions and distracting yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's really important. But talking about the drinking, I remember on both my 20th and 21st birthdays, just getting like blackout drunk and crying, like just
having a great time.
Yeah, just because that was the age. Like he died when he was 20, and so that was such a strange year for me. And then so was 21.
Totally. Totally, man. That's a different level for sure. I've already been thinking about that of when I turn the age he was when he passed. That's going to be really, really hard.
Yeah, it's a strange feeling.
It is, man.
Especially for me now, where now, I'm 28, and so it's like it's been, has it been 12 years? Yeah, it's been 12 years at this point, and and his what would be his 33rd birthday is coming up actually in it's a week from today.
Oh wow!
So. It's a weird feeling, and and I know I love how open and honest you are about it because obviously we don't know each other super well, but we follow each other on social media, and just seeing you post about Ben and about the birthdays and anniversaries, I think it's so important to just honor that stuff.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's definitely one of those things where it's certainly not like I'm sharing this stuff on social media for engagement. It's just Ben was such an
ironically though, it often does get the most engagement.
It's been picking me up a lot of followers. Ben didn't actually exist. I'm just trying to get followers. He was such an expressive dude, and he had so much to say, and it's a nice way for me to honor him. And, it's like, his music. He wrote music, and he made some, for me, really great music, and I like sharing it. And not that it's like a crazy platform or anything like that, but over the last few years, I've gotten a little bit more of that with comedy. And yeah, there's a lot of times where I'm like, I'd way rather share a thought about Ben or honor Ben or a sentiment about him than just like, come check me this weekend at the Chuckle Bucket or some bullshit like that,
Is it a real club?
Probably.
Yeah, it sounds
if you think of some stupid name for a club like Grin Palace or the Chuckle Bucket, I guarantee exists somewhere. There's no comedy club without an awful name that doesn't exist.
What's the first club you ever performed at? We can stick on the grief and
No. It's fine. Whatever you want. That's
Okay.
That's a good question. I want it because I know it was in Edmonton. I'm just trying to think if. Oh, it would have been the comic strip, not the one in New York.
Oh, there's one in Edmonton as
Yes.
well?
Do you know those House of Comedies?
Like House of Blues?
Except worse. There's this strip, like there's this chain of clubs in the States called House of Comedy, but the one in Edmonton is called the Comic Strip. And yeah, it's in West Edmonton Mall. No, that's a lie. It was the Laugh Lounge, another phenomenal name. Laugh Lounge, also in Edmonton. There was just off White Ave in Edmonton, and the first set I ever did was at that club. Yeah.
So that was an open mic?
Yeah, it was like an amateur night.
How'd it go?
I mean, so I was 21. I remember for a 21-year-old who had just tried stand-up for the first time, I remember it being fairly good. But it also wasn't. It wasn't at all. It was the belch. It was disgusting. It wasn't one of those things where it's like, this is it. This is what I have to do from here on out. I was just like, cool. That was fun. I had some ideas, kind of sort of conveyed them. And I had a couple people after the comics came up like, hey, man, that was good. You should keep doing it. So it was that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so at what point did it become like, oh, this is the thing?
Once I was done basketball, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing it. I've always loved comedy, like I said, and I still feel this way. I've never been a huge consumer of stand-up. I've always, like you turn on CBC in Canada and there's Just for Laugh stuff, and sometimes it'd be really cool. I remember seeing like Mitch Hedberg and stuff and being like, oh, he's really cool. But a lot of times I was like, God, these guys are dorks. Just some dude standing up there like looking like, can you believe this? What's going on? Like just in disbelief, or I hate when this happens. And he just says some stupid thing like, you hate that? Shut up, man. But I always thought comics were dorks, and now being in the belly of the beast, I mean that more than ever. I think the vast majority of comics are huge dorks. But I just loved comedy, and I was like, all right, well, this is a cool way to try and make people laugh, because that's my favorite thing to do, despite being such a depressing person. So I was doing it on like the rotation of the amateur nights. But then when I finished college and I lost all sense of purpose, I realize now, especially in hindsight, I just had an unhealthy, my sense of self and all my self-worth was tied up in basketball, and I just transferred that over to comedy. And so when I was like 24, 25, that's when I was like, all right, well, I guess this is what I have to do. And if I don't, it makes me a failure in life.
Do you feel like that relationship to your self-worth has changed, or that it's the same?
It was changing. And then to tie it back to the grief, I will say when Ben passed, I took about as many steps backwards mentally as you could. And I'm trying to get back to, equilibrium and having the perspective on it of like, it can be both things. It can matter to you. You can be passionate about it. You can really enjoy it, but it can't be everything. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get back to that because honestly, since living in New York, I've been, it's funny because the better things went, the worse I started doing mentally, if that makes sense.
It does, but also like elaborate on
sure.
that.
Like the better things went in the sense of like hoping I can check this box, that box, the other, like I want to work this club. I want to get this credit, whether that's Just for Laughs or Comedy Central or like just recently doing a Don't Tell or something. I'm super grateful for all of those. But, I never even looked at it as like, once that happens, then I'll be happy. It's just, then it becomes like, all right, well, shit, if I did this kind of puts a pressure on me that I have to now go do this or that or that. Or when you are working the clubs you've always wanted to work, I struggle with the fear of loss, which I think makes total sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly, with all the stuff we were just talking about. So it's hard to be present and actually just enjoy it. And then I catch myself at times and it's like, God damn, like, why am I this sad? Because I'm doing the stuff I want to be doing, but it's just fucking eating at me. But I think it's totally fair and understandable given the context of losing someone as close to you as a brother.
Yeah, of course. And then I mean, it's also like I think it's Jim Carrey that had the quote where he's like, I wish everyone could be famous so they could realize that it's meaningless. And
totally. I wanted to ask, because I know like what this pod's kind of about is like fame and stuff. And I'm curious for like your thoughts on fame, because I have my own, of course, and like your aspirations, if they exist, with fame, what that means to you. I was wanting, if you don't mind,
Yeah, of course.
I was curious for your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like growing up, I think I just kind of had this vision of myself in the future as being famous. And
Interesting.
I don't know, like even before I was doing comedy or knew I wanted to do comedy, I think I just had like such high aspirations. And I mean, I played basketball. I was never like good, not like like that was never a possibility, but I would have these daydreams about like playing in the NBA.
Sure.
And then like, of course that was unrealistic, but in high school I was trying to be a rapper and then, which I think,
didn't realize that.
I think knowing somebody who was a famous rapper kind of made it seem like, oh, maybe that is realistic.
No, totally, 100%.
And I think I just, even once I started doing comedy and even still some, like I just had these dreams of like, okay, well, I'll just, I'm going to have like a show like, Louis was such an inspiration. Like
Right.
a show like Louis, like there'll just be a show like that and it'll be mine and like I'll be in movies and stuff. And like, I think the longer I've done comedy, the less I care about fame. I mean, obviously I still like will have like these, these daydreams about like winning an Oscar, even though I don't even have it. Like, it's like, also even in my daydream, it's always best supporting actor.
Yeah.
It's never, I'm never the lead. I'm self-aware enough, but I think at this point I want an audience. Like,
Yeah.
And I hope that this podcast can help create that in some way. And I just want, kind of at this point, I just want comedy to be my career. And I don't want to have to work a day job. I want to be able to tour and headline, and have like a fan base. But I don't need to be Kevin Hart.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like when I was little, I never honestly was like, I want to be a star or I want to be adored. I remember, like watching the movies that I really like, funny movies, just kind of being like, well, that would be cool. Like that's making me laugh. I like making people laugh. I seem to have a knack at making people laugh. So I kind of would think about, well, if that's what you do, maybe you like are in movies or something like that. And then my brother Sam and I really got into making movies. So I never was thinking of like, I want to be famous. I just always, I think, wanted to be creative. And then the older I've gotten, the more I've really actually quite struggled with that because not only do I not want to be famous, I think aspiring for fame is one of the dumbest things someone can do. And when I hear a comic, and this is all just my own personal bias and bullshit, but when I hear a comic talk about like, oh, I can't wait till I'm famous, I'm like, you're a fucking moron. Then again, that's just me and also being a pretty cynical dude. I'm the same. Like I would like, in comedy, you need a following to get booked to sell tickets. So from that standpoint, yes, I would like a following just so I can facilitate selling tickets and this be how you make a living and it be more of a comfortable living because I've done comedy full time and whatnot. And it's when you're not a name, it's really, really hard. I accept that it's hard and nobody's making me do it but me. It's just what it is. So I don't mean that to cry wolf. But yeah, I think fame is just a really stupid concept. I think celebrity culture represents a lot of what's wrong with the world.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think it's an inconvenient reality of the thing we've chosen and the thing we're just like, for whatever reason, it's our predisposition to want to be doing stand-up. It's a bummer that it requires putting yourself out there online to build a following. It's what it is, though.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and honestly, like I think I post clips on social media, and I have to like when I'm writing like a to-do list, I set reminders to like post more, and it's not something I want to do, but I'm like I recognize that it's like that's part of the game.
Exactly, it just is
and
what it is.
And it's like I think that I agree with what you're saying, where I'm like to me like my main goals are just like I just want to be creative and I want to get better. Yeah. I love doing comedy.
100%.
I want to get better, and I do like. Other things, like I want to get writing opportunities and acting opportunities. And I think it was interesting when I had Liz Glazer on the podcast, she said something really interesting, which was that like she views like fame as like a consequence of the things she wants to do, which was such an interesting way of putting it, where it's like, it's not necessarily for so many people. It is the goal, and I think and I'm not saying that like if I became a movie star, like if I had my own TV show and I'm not saying like, oh no, that'd be so awful.
Sure.
Like, but I'm just saying for me, the goal is I don't care. I care about fame as it relates to the knowing that I'm good at what I'm doing, and that I'm continuing to get better, and that people like it. Because also so much of creating art of any kind is like you want a fan base because that means people enjoy what you're making.
Yeah, totally.
And like I want. Oh shoot! I accidentally stopped recording. Okay, it's still recording.
There you go.
All right, cool. But yeah, so as I was saying, like, I want people to, and I think I care a lot about the respect of my peers.
Yeah.
And even that's part of this podcast is like, it's been so fun to get to talk to people, like you who have been, are just like further along in comedy than I am. And so it's great to just have the opportunity to even like sit down and just talk about comedy and life.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally. That's some of the best parts about it to me, honestly, outside of just the doing. That's the fun stuff, is just having like a nice conversation that's not just riddled with posturing bullshit.
Yeah.
That stuff drives me nuts. I've been around too many of that where it's like there will be the famous comic or the comic that's killing it. And it's like, oh, wow, you were just a shell of a human being, because all you can do is talk about how much money you made, how many tickets you sold, how many followers you have. And it's like, cool, man. I would not want to trade places with you at all, because that's just, to me, that's just a meaningless existence. And I think both of us having the experience of unfortunately losing a sibling, not that we've seen through the matrix and we get it now, but I think we at least can have a bit of a filter on what's bullshit and what's not. And I agree with you that what's important about this, to me at least, is just the act of doing, creating, putting out there, and hopefully improving at it, because there's I don't know. I just think if your whole thing is I don't care how or what gets me there, I just want to be on a box or a screen and I want people to know who I am. It's like, what does that actually mean though?
Yeah, and I mean, and I have this conversation with like, so many of my like even like close friends who I really love, where it's like that they'll talk like, oh, I wish I was getting booked more, and I wish my reels were getting more likes and views, and it's like look, I feel the same way. I also want those things for myself, but I'm like, if the goal is not to get better, and if you can't get any satisfaction from having a good set and like from continuing to improve, then what are you doing this for?
100%, dude. I fully agree. I've had some shows I feel like at whether they're one of the bigger clubs here or in LA even, where you can go up and tell the jokes that go well and be like, it's a showcase set essentially. I need to go out and I need to kill. And you go up and you do that and just kind of leave after, and it's just kind of like, cool. Like, I guess, cool, I think. Like, I told jokes that I know elicit a response, and the response that I knew would come happened. In a way, that's the point, but there's a lot to be said of like doing another show where like, yeah, it was like a whatever spot and not very desirable circumstances. The crowd kind of stunk. It wasn't a big crowd, but still, despite that, with these new thoughts I had, I figured a joke out and it was killing. Like, that's, in a lot of ways, to me, that's the juice, because that's the sign of progress.
I completely agree. And I have this thing where I think in some ways this is like a self-sabotaging thing where like I hate doing a set where I don't do anything new.
Oh God.
Where I don't do not even like a single like if I don't have a single like riff or like new idea in there.
Yeah.
And I very rarely do, and a lot of times it ends up with like me maybe having a worse set.
Totally, of course.
Than I would if I was just sticking to my like tightest 5 minutes or whatever. But it's just the fun of like being like, oh my God, I had this riff that crushed.
Exactly.
And then even sometimes you have a riff that doesn't. It's like, well, I tried something.
Yeah,
totally. And it's like
100%, buddy.
And sometimes I'll even say like after a riff doesn't go, I'll be like, oh, that was, I've never said that before. I had no idea if it was going to be funny or not.
No, totally. I really like that stuff. It can be a self-sabotage thing, which I do way too often. There have been a number of spots where it's not like entitled, I think I'm above it, but I'm like, all right, with the context of this show, say it's like the first time you're working a club and the booker's there or something, it's like, just kill. But then this dumb thought will creep into my mind. I'm like, I might as well start with this. and just dig myself a hole.
So often I do that. Yeah.
But that's part of the, I don't know, man. It's that, and that's what's tough is that's kind of why you want the following too, is it can enable you to do that stuff without fear of repercussion as much, because that is fun. There is something to be said. And obviously I'm not the first comic to say this, but there is something to be said of cratering and getting yourself out of that hole. And that's a sign of progress as a comic too. I just don't creatively, I just don't get a ton out of telling a joke that's polished, that generally gets a good response. That's the whole thing. You're doing that so we can go then tape an album or a special or whatever to put it out there. But goddamn, is it boring just reading off the mental teleprompter?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's a big thing in comedy where it's like you are part of why you want to become more of a name is you, so much of it is about goodwill.
Yeah.
And so sort of like if I'm at like a club or a show where I don't know anyone, I'm like, I have to do jokes that at least up top, I have to, there's more pressure to do jokes that I know will work because I'm like, these people don't know me.
Yeah.
If I do a bad joke, they think I'm bad at comedy.
Exactly.
Where, even like I don't have, necessarily like a fan base, but I have, friends and people that will come to show and like they have more patience for it,
Totally.
And so like, when I was hosting a monthly show, I would be like, well, that's an opportunity where every show I'm going to try some new stuff.
Yeah.
And but then I think it can become a crutch, where I was I was watching Shane Gillis's SNL monologue, and I think that I was like, oh, he's gotten to the point where he's maybe too famous.
I was just going to say, I think in comedy, it comes across, it's such an interesting thing where it's like the thing you're striving for is what's going to, I think, sap a lot of the joy out of it. I won't name drop, but I was talking to a comic he's like a top comic at this point. And we were talking about this very thing. If he was like, if you're not careful, there's just no winning, because when you don't have a following, you're like, I need a following because then that's how I'm going to get money. That's how I'm going to get more consistent bookings, this, that, and the other. But then when you have the following, you're like, well, now I probably will never know if one of my jokes are good again, because it's just going to be this echo chamber of fans. And now, especially in comedy, fans are such fans with pods and stuff. It's not even just like, I like the person's joke. Like, I don't know Shane Gillis. I'm not trying to talk shit on Shane Gillis, but Shane Gillis's fans are so fucking obsessed with that guy. The way like a Trump cultist is obsessed with Trump, where he could just go up and have violent diarrhea and people would be like, "Oh, Shane's fucking sick, dude." And there's something about that where it's like, yeah, cool, you're probably making a lot more money. Well, not probably, objectively.
He's definitely making a lot more money.
Objectively, maybe a few more cents. But it's just a bummer when you're like, the thing that you were aspiring to is kind of lost now because you're just a famous person. You're a personality.
Yeah.
You're an influencer.
Yeah, and I heard Anthony Jeselnik say this about Shane Gillis, where he was like, he's a fine comic, but his fans want him to be the only comedian.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that seems to be sort of like the landscape of everything now.
Yeah.
Where it's I've heard people like refer to as saying like there's no monoculture, where it used to be like we all had like the same cultural references, and now it's like everybody's in their own little box where it's like they like one thing. And everybody's an influencer. Yeah. And even like an example of it was like the Kendrick and Drake beef, where like it's people are like, you can just like both of them. Yeah. Like you can think one of them's a bad person, you can still like both of their music. Like you can listen, go back and forth between the two diss songs. And
yeah, exactly.
Like you don't have to be. These are not your friends.
Exactly. They're not your friends. That's 100%, dude. And there you see that. Like I'm not simping for Drake. I could not give less of a shit about sticking up for Drake. I don't care.
Yeah.
I just need people to know that as a Canadian, I don't.
He's a Canadian. I'm a Jew. So like together we create Drake.
We are Drake. I could not care less about that. But you see that with Kendrick Lamar too. He's just like so famous now, and his reputation is he's an artist. He's a poet, and everything the guy does, people are like, "Whoa, holy shit! You don't understand it. His Super Bowl thing that represented the flag." And it's like, "Oh, you mean the people wearing red, white, and blue, designed like the flag, represented the flag? Whoa, holy shit!" Like there's just people simp so much now because it's just celebrity worship. It's stupid. And that is something I will say it's hard. It's hard being a comic at the level I'm at, where on one hand, it's like, yeah, like headline, I'm lucky that I get to do some of the clubs I do. I've got some credits now and stuff like that. And I'm cognizant of all that. Financially, does it make things easier? Fuck no, not at all. And again, that's fine because this is what I signed up for. But there is something to be said, and I've tried to be cognizant of this the last few years, of this is probably the most fun I'll ever have doing stand-up, because I can go do a packed out show at a good club in New York, which by default makes it one of the best comedy clubs in the world, honestly. Yeah. And nobody will know who the fuck I am. And when you go up and you just rip for 15 minutes, you're like, I earned that. Objectively, I earned that because nobody came in outside of, like, we're at a comedy show. We want to laugh.
But nobody's there. Nobody is there to see you.
No, fuck no. Yeah. You're just like if you do really well, you're a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
I find, like, at the New York clubs, like, if you're like doing the cellar, like they're if you're there, they assume you're good. So you kind of have to have you kind of have to suck to not do well. Not that it's easy. Like, you still got to bring it, but they're expecting, like, all right, well, this is going to be a certain caliber comic, whatever. So they do give you the benefit of the doubt. But when you're just like, damn, like, I really just killed, that feels very pure. And I've seen it, and I've spoken to some comics who have really, really, really leveled up, and they have some new jokes where it's like, they don't even think it's a joke yet. They're just trying to figure it out. But their fans who lost their mind when their name got announced are just like, there's the guy we listened to talk, and he's saying words, and even while they're telling their new premises that they know aren't there yet, and it's murdering, they're like, guys, like, what are we doing? Chill out. That doesn't look fun to me whatsoever.
I've heard that, like, Chris Rock will, like, bomb on purpose. That has he ever popped by the cellar when you've been there?
I haven't actually, yeah. I haven't seen him do that. But I've heard tons of people say the same thing. Like, he will just bomb for the first, like, it's supposed to be a 15-minute set. He's going to go over, and the first 5 minutes will just be him intentionally cratering. Because then he'll get more, and I respect that so much.
It's amazing, and that's why. And I think that he's still so good.
He might be the best comic of all time.
I think so.
And it's so cool. I find that stuff to be so inspiring, because he could, if he wanted to, just go down and do Chris Rock shit and kill. But the guy cares about, sounds so cheesy, he cares about the craft of it.
He does, yeah.
And that is a huge part of why he is as good as he is. Like, the guy is trying to avoid an echo chamber, and that's kind of unavoidable for a guy of his stature. But I just think that rules.
Him and Bill Burr, I think, are the two people where I feel like they've avoided that, because I think it's so easy to, you know, again, I'm like me talking about what cameras used to be like. I'm not at that level. I'm hypothesizing,
of course,
but I think it becomes so easy to just, like, I think Kevin Hart's a great example of this, because he was one of my favorite comedians as a kid, and you know, and I think that, you know, he is one of the most comedically gifted people to ever live. Him and, like, Eddie Murphy are, like, on this level, and Eddie Murphy stopped doing stand-up for this reason, I think, where it's like they just can't bomb. Yeah, totally. And I think that they might not have it in them to do the Chris Rock thing of just talking slow. Like, they honestly might be, as performers, too gifted for that, which is a weird thing to say. But I think wild. I think Rock and Burr are the two people that have just fully avoided that trap. Yeah,
I think you're probably right on that. I think it's I don't have any sympathy for them, because it's like, oh no, poor you living with hundreds of millions of dollars might not get an honest laugh ever again. But I do have a level of sympathy that if you're a serious comic, and a serious comic just in the sense of, like, you got the addiction, you have the affliction, and kind of the high we're chasing is conveying a thought and getting an honest reaction. Like, that's kind of the scratching our arm to get that. And the thought of never getting that again, that's a bit of a bummer. And you see some of these comics who are just like, you got so famous, you've succeeded so much at being a famous comic that you are no longer a good comedian.
Yeah, and I think that, and this is gonna sound so pretentious, but I think that it's like you reach that point, and it's like it's a battle between what's gonna win between capitalism and artistry.
Yeah, but
And I think with somebody like Kevin Hart, it's like the capitalism won.
oh yeah,
You know, and which is not to say like he's not funny anymore. Like,
Sure.
I'll still see him do things that are funny, but it's like he's clearly. I mean, I guess this is like what people mean when they say like selling out.
Yeah.
Like that's just a different way of saying it.
Yeah.
So it's not like a super original thought on my part, but I do think that it's sort of like it becomes that battle of like, what do I care more about between making money and being good at my craft and continuing to improve.
100%. Yeah, no, I mean, sure, it's talking about selling out, but I think you're explaining it more than just, I think when people just say he's a sellout or she's a sellout, it's kind of like, can you actually say what you mean
Right.
or what's actually entailed with that? And I agree, man. If I think there's something to be said with selling out being more like, or not so much selling out when it's just like you just get too big. That you can't, it's like unavoidable. It's too big to fail. Yeah, 100. Yeah. But then there's also the level of selling out where it's like the right wing dipshit comics who are like, oh, you guys have just sold your soul to shill. Which and I don't care if you're right wing, 100% worse.
Yes.
I don't care for the most part if you're right wing or conservative. Like, I really don't. I say this in my special too. Like, I know plenty of like progressive people who are garbage human beings, and I know plenty of conservative people who are lovely human beings. But now we got these like Theo Vaughns and the whole Kill Tony crew, and Joe Rogan is like, you guys are fucking sellouts. You guys are, and that's like, that's pathetic.
I mean, it's one thing if you're going to be like, yeah, I'm just going to do deodorant ads and make millions of dollars off of that. I'm like, I don't respect it artistically, but I don't blame you and don't know that I would not do it
100%.
if I was in your shoe.
100%.
But it's another thing to be like, I'm one of the biggest comedy podcasters and I'm going to have Donald Trump and JD Vance on my podcast. Yeah. And I mean, like, Rogan and the Tony Hinchcliffe and Theo Vaughn and Schultz, like, none of these are guys where I'm like, oh, I was such a big fan, I feel betrayed. No. But the comic in me and like the artist in me was like, what the fuck, man? This is so disappointing.
100%. And it's not even just the having them on. That's one thing where I'm like, good, but push them a little.
Yeah.
Ask a tough question.
If you're going to have them on, then be like, as a podcaster, I guess I'm a journalist now.
Exactly.
And like, because it's like, I'm sure Jon Stewart would have them on, but he would fucking challenge them.
Yeah, exactly. He'd actually challenge them and not just simp for them. And yeah, if you do that and that's how you go about it, it's like you don't get, you have zero artistic credibility of being like, I don't care what your takes are on anything.
Yeah.
You're a simp. You're a shill. Like, let's just be clear. Like, yeah, sure, you're a comic and a podcaster, but before all that, you're a simp and a shill.
Absolutely. 100%.
We got to avoid that, baby. Gotta keep it's I get it. It's comedy, and a lot of this is what I do like about comedy is I try to not I don't put it on a pedestal because I think sometimes I'm too down on stand-up. I think what rules about comedy and the comedy that I do consume, that I do enjoy, is it could be a big thought, it could be a little thought. It doesn't have to be this like, whoa, that was so profound. It could be as stupid as like, man, yeah, just like what a dumb one-liner. But it's a thought, and getting that thought out there with the intention of making people laugh. That's kind of it for me. And the simplicity in that, I think, is actually really, really cool. And I think to maintain that, you have to avoid selling out. I think you have to.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, that it doesn't always have to be like a huge, like George Carlin is often like revered for like, you know, his political jokes and like how thought-provoking they were, but it's like he also had like fart jokes.
100%.
You know, and it's like, and those are just as valid as comedy. Like here's one I just thought of yesterday that's really stupid, that Amelia Perez sounds like somebody trying to say Emily in Paris in a bad French accent.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Totally.
But it's like, it's just a thought. It just.
Exactly.
And it's like, hopefully it can, you know, make you laugh and make your day a little bit better.
I like that, because I like stuff that's really about things, as long as it doesn't get to the point of being preachy, as long as there's actual punchlines in there, and not to make everything about my special. But I tried doing that of like, I can be talking about what I think are real things, but at least with jokes. But then I also have a ridiculous bit that I end it with that's about male orgasms being funny. And on other shit I've done, some of the jokes I like the most are just meaningless. They're stupid. But despite how stupid they are, it's like, all right, well, a little bit of thought went into that. Yeah. That's kind of all it is for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in the special you do a really good job of that, of kind of like, it's interesting because of how there has been this right-wing shift in comedy, how much it feels like you have to like preface bits more now of being like, I'm gonna do a joke that's sexist. I don't hate women, you know? And it's like, and I don't necessarily, as a comic, I don't like that I have to do it, but I'm like, I do find it necessary.
Yeah,
like,
with certain ones.
I think that you do a good job of like, because you have, you know, you talk a lot about masculinity in your special, and, you know, like, I think you do a good job like of riding that balance between like, I'm gonna tell you how I really feel, and I'm also gonna do these jokes, and like,
thanks,
without
man.
being too preachy with it.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good to hear, and I appreciate that, because I kind of after the fact, I was like, I almost want this to be like sort of like without knowing kind of a one-man-ish show, because it does sort of have a theme through it, which is about masculinity.
It's great with the title, Mr.
Thanks,
Sir.
man. Yeah, it worked out, baby. But it also was important to me to like just be goofy, and it's not meant to be like a real direct shot at these Gillis. It's like, they don't fucking care.
Yeah.
But that's why I tried to. I throughout it, I keep doing the whole joke talking about how I'm an alpha and how you can't do anything
That's so
anymore.
funny.
You can't say anything anymore, because so much of stand up is just these fucking losers being like, everybody's so sensitive, can't say anything anymore. Then they just say the most vile shit to a huge pop of people laughing. It's like, God, you guys are soft. You guys are morons. So that was kind of the whole like point for me, is I wanted to make fun of that dumbass attitude, and then also tell jokes where I'm like, I feel like I put thought into these, where I don't actually think I'm saying something bad, but if you're not really fully paying attention, you might be like, wait, what did he just say? That was fucked up. But then when you actually think about it, it's like, oh, he actually was coming from a pretty open-minded viewpoint there. And I don't know if how necessarily well I do it, but that's the kind of comedy I like doing. And for the most part, I think I'm proud of it on the hour.
Yeah, no, and I think it's so funny for you to do the like alpha male stuff, because it's like you are like a 6'5" big guy, former college athlete. Like you look like now, but I think even just having one conversation with you, you can tell like, oh no, this is like a soft and like nice guy.
Oh,
like,
good. Yeah.
I think. Do you know Jeff Asmus?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a lot of that too, playing with the alpha male stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And he's what I love about him is that he will like perform this in like the persona of like, you can't say anything, but he'll like shit on the right.
Exactly.
In his in his, and he'll be like making fun of the people that say like you can't say,
totally.
Which is such a like, it almost feels like for that group of people it's kind of like a catch-22, because like, well, if I don't think this is funny, then I'm a snowflake. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Which ironically they are the biggest fucking.
They really are. The
snowflakes.
biggest snowflakes you will ever meet are mega cultists who think they're free speech advocates, and if you say one thing that makes them uncomfortable, they will shit their pants, because they're cowards, they're sheeps, and they're cucks. Said it.
That's maybe that might be the clip.
You know,
yeah, you know what? What my roommate reminded me of when I was talking about how I was interviewing you, Mr. Sir. That's have you seen Holes?
You know, I haven't, but I've heard plenty of people say there's Mr.
John
Sir.
Voight's character, which I forgot about.
That's so funny.
That's kind
so
of a non
funny.
sequitur.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's people have told me about it. I'm like, oh, watch Holes, and I just completely forget about it.
It is a good movie, but it's also like, that's a movie I watched as a kid, so I'm like, who knows how
vintage
good it is.
Shia LaBeouf.
R.I.P. He's
Truly.
not dead, but career wise,
he's kind of dead. R.I.P. to Louis Stevens. Even Stevens.
Oh, that's his name, and Even Stevens.
Yeah,
I completely forgot.
Come on,
that's
it's a phenomenal reference.
I think that was good. I think that's showing our age differences. That it's like,
that is true.
You're an Even Stevens Shia LaBeouf. I'm a Holes Shia LaBeouf.
That's true.
Which I think is only like a 2. Those are like 2 years apart.
That's when he had the mop. Yeah, we have levels of Shia LaBeouf fandom.
Yeah, God, he is an incredible actor.
He is. He's very talented.
So fucking talented.
He's very talented.
He was. I remember when all the stuff about him came. That's one where I was like, that sucks.
Yeah.
To hear, like, obviously it sucks for like the victims of his behavior.
Of course.
That's the worst. It's not.
Of course.
I'm the victim. It's like,
what about me?
I know you got abused by him, but like, I can't enjoy. I haven't seen Honey Boy. Now, can I even watch Honey Boy?
You're the victim here,
I'm
dude.
the real victim.
Anyone rational would say you are the victim here. No, of course, it goes without saying it's infinitely worse to anybody, and these creeps are shitty too, but there can be the ones who are like, damn, I actually appreciated this person's creative output.
Yeah, and especially, I think for me, it's always, I'm like, fucking, I hate it when it's a guy that kind of looks like me.
Sure.
Too. Like, just also like a Jewish actor that I've been told I look like. I'm like, what the fuck, man?
God
Come
damn.
on.
How could you do this to us?
It's doing it against the tribe, man.
Yeah, man. Selfish.
Yeah, man. All right, so I guess let's get to the question, the titular question. Why aren't you more famous?
PC bullshit, politics, DEI. No, that's
That's the clip.
yeah. Can't say anything anymore. That's why. Why am I not more famous, or why am I not famous? I mean, plenty of reasons. There's so many comics. It's tough to not get lost in the sea of it. I don't think I'm terrific at, like, I'll post and stuff, but I'm not really adept with self-promotion other than just like posting stuff online and whatnot. And I also think you need to have a drive and a belief in yourself that I don't know if I do. I have a drive. I just don't know if I have the belief in myself. Some comics I know who have like really leveled up my comedy standards are famous. They have this swagger and this confidence that's unflinching, at least seemingly. Maybe it's something they're projecting. I don't have that. I'm trying to work on optimism to think I have a higher ceiling than I traditionally have felt about myself. So I think that's, and also I haven't been aspiring to it. So that makes it tough. I think I've just been trying to be the best version of myself as a comic. And that sometimes can work for comics that kind of just like, oh, this comic's just doing it for this reason, and it's kind of minimalist, and that can be the thing that pushes them. But I think that's pretty rare. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
And I think that you'll meet those people that are like, they have that combination of being really good at comedy or whatever other art or type of entertainment they're pursuing, and they're also so good at social media.
Yeah.
And like there's just these people where you're like, that guy's a fucking star.
Yeah.
And it's not like a 1-to-1 of like being good. Like, they are good, but it's like there's a difference between being good and being a star.
100%.
And
man.
you know, I wonder if anybody really does get famous by accident. You know, if there are these people that are just so good that they just can't not be famous, or if it's everybody that is like a star is talented and has that belief in themselves and that desire to be famous.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I would guess if it happens, it is incredibly, incredibly infrequent, because this just isn't a meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it'll be just someone who's like, yeah, I'm not going to put let's use like Ethan Simmons Patterson. You know who he is?
I do, yeah.
So he's phenomenal. He's a great comic. And I think he could probably, by comedy standards, be famous right now. But what's part about what makes him so awesome is he just doesn't use social media.
Isn't he? He's like a social worker or something, doesn't he?
Yeah, he was like a nurse and stuff. Yeah. He's just like a good person. And he's still got stuff. He's done like JFL, and I think he's done like Comedy Central and whatnot. But he just doesn't buy into that shit. And despite that, he's still gotten some pushes. But in today's heavy social media, self-promotional world, I think you need to really be pushing yourself to get to that next level. And some people are just like a perfect blend of they're really good comics and they're really savvy with social media. There's plenty of people, and I'm sorry to be an asshole, but I'm just calling it like it is. There's plenty of comics you're like, wow, they suck. Or like they have, I shouldn't even say they suck, because if people are buying tickets to them and they're excited to go see this person, then that's fair. Anybody can consume whatever kind of creativity they want for whatever reason.
Consume whatever dumb fucking
but
bullshit
truly,
like.
if like, I'm not gonna say the guy's name, I don't feel bad about saying, but there's like this comic who's blown up, who literally his whole thing is he brings people up and they hump the stool, like that's his shtick. This guy's selling out theaters. And so if somebody,
he's not even doing the stool humping.
Oh, he humps the stool. But he'll just like ask people in the crowd, like, so how do you do it? Like, what do you do when you're fucking a girl? And then come show me. And then the person goes up and humps the stool, and the place goes nuts. And he will sell out theaters because of that. And if that's how you want to spend your money, and if you're like, well, that's a fun night out, who am I to be like, you're wrong? It's not that you're wrong, but you can't. It's not because the guy has anything to say. Famous. But that also just goes to show that it's a. What does that even mean? What? It's nothing. It's nothing. It's just capitalism.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
Yeah, and I also think that maybe there's something where, and obviously this is a generalization. I'm sure that there are executives and agents and managers that are like good people, but I think for a lot of people that are on the business side of entertainment, they might want their entertainers to be as like morally bankrupt
100%.
as them. And obviously, like, I'm sure that there are people that are on the business side that are like, I love comedy and I'm not good at it, and this is what I know how to do. Yeah. And those are great people, and like we need those people.
Yeah, we do.
But I'm generalizing where I'm like, I think if you're not that kind of person, you might just vibe better with the people that are just super ambitious.
Yeah, just the vultures that are like, if by me repping you means I can get a commission, that's what matters. And if you humping the stool is what will sell tickets, let's go make art, baby. And all the power to you. Like, I don't honestly care. There's worse things you can do, and people are doing worse things in the world, obviously. So I don't mean it bitterly. I don't mean it jealously. I really don't. But I think as comics, if what we're supposed to do is like skewer society and joke about bullshit, that shit's bullshit. So I don't feel bad being like, yeah, man, I'm not saying like, you're taking the bread off my table, I should be up there humping the stool. That's not it. It's just, I have no problem also being like, yeah, that's filler, that's nothing, it's lowest common denominator, it's dumb nonsense being catered to people that don't think.
Yeah. So just to end on a more positive note, who are some comics right now that you really like, that you think like people should watch? Maybe they should be more famous than they are,
Yeah, great question. Me? No.
Hey, I mean, you're look, after watching, you're on the way up.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
I truly, I'm not just saying that because you're here.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. I would say... I'll say Ethan Sims Patterson again because he's wicked. It's tough because I think he has a fan page on social media. Like, people have made stuff of him. You can see his stuff. He rules, but you can see him doing spots.
I didn't even realize he didn't have any social.
Yeah, he's really cool. He's a really cool person and a really talented comic.
He's another guy. I know him more from basketball.
Yeah, totally.
From playing basketball.
Yeah, he loves hooping.
From stand up. Yeah.
He's a great dude. I want to be intentional with this answer because I also think there's the ones where like a guy like Asmus doesn't need anybody. Like he's doing super well now. So I am going to say, give me a sec because David Drake, I think. David Drake is fantastic. He's a New York comic. I really, really enjoy his stuff.
Also a super nice guy.
Super nice dude. Just a very, very funny guy. I'm going to say, let me think of an LA person. Keith Johnson. Okay. He's a dude in LA. He's got one of the best speaking voices in the world. I really like Keith Johnson. And I got to say a Canadian comic. I'll say my buddy Jarrett Campbell, honestly. Right. Jarrett's really, really funny. He's a dude that like off stage just cracks me up so much. And then on stage, he's really, really funny too.
All right, yeah, check those people out. And then what do you want to plug?
I would like to plug The Hour. It's on YouTube, on my YouTube page. It's called Mr. Sir.
We'll put a link to it in the description.
I would like to plug that. And then I also do a podcast called The Freedom Hour, which is a satirical making fun of mega idiots. It's actually quite funny, I think. It's called The Freedom Hour. And then I also want to plug... my brother's music. He's passed, but his band's name was Worst Days Down. They have a couple albums on Spotify. Everything else you get. It's like punk, pop punk, rock and roll, but beautiful vocal melodies and a lot of meaning in those songs.
Hell yeah! All right, Henry Sir, man, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Extra.